Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Koestner. I am the primary host of the Dear Katie podcast, and we are so delighted to have you take this journey with us on our weekly podcast episodes. I just want to remind everyone to do great self-care. Thriving is part of the purpose of this podcast, and we definitely want you to take a break at any time. Warm bath, fresh air, walk a dog, have a bite of chocolate, whatever you need to do good care for yourself. Just as a reintroduction, if you're not familiar with me, I am the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine at age 18 as the first in history to speak out nationally and publicly as the victim of date rape. And HBO made a film about me, and I went on to become the executive director of the Take Back the Night Foundation. We are the oldest, largest global movement on sexual violence in all forms for all people in the world. So we encourage you to visit our website for lots more information. So I'm going to turn it over to our hosts and our guests for today. Hi, everybody. It's Katie Koestner and the Dear Katie podcast. Welcome back for another episode. And as I always like to remind everyone, please take excellent, wonderful care along this healing journey we are all on. I think all of you will find such delight and hope and healing out of our guests, from our guest, Sheila Wood, today. I'm going to tell you all a little bit about what we're going to talk about and introduce Sheila so you all know. My guest today is Sheila Wood, Dr. Wood, and she is coming to us with a strong desire to help facilitate the healing journey of everyone who has been through sexual assault and probably any form of sexual violence. Sheila has her PhD in clinical pathology, and in her work has often seen how clearing residual trapped emotions from traumatic experiences like sexual violence can help heal physical ailments. She applies her scientific knowledge and her gifts of energy healing, spiritual mediumship, and Akashic? Mm-hmm. Akashic, thank you. I can't wait to learn about that. Akashic Records reading to release unwanted and often embedded energy. Deep healing is also facilitated by working at several levels of consciousness and across several lifetimes. She provides a formalized 10-week program to guide the path from dread to reconciliation and rejuvenation, followed by a map for continuing self-care. So doesn't that sound exciting? I can't wait to learn all of those things from you, Sheila. So welcome. We are so delighted. I like thinking about how many lifetimes we're going to go through and learning what Akashic Records healing looks like. So maybe we start with, I feel like we need a dictionary first.
Okay.
Maybe define some terms. So our listeners
granted,
go ahead.
I will read a summary about the Akashic Records. Just a bit of an introduction about my background. I have been a scientist most of my life, but about 12 years ago, I started reading and studying metaphysics, which is the science of being and knowing and understanding where we came from and what our purpose is. And I like to explain it as understanding the invisible forces that help us on a daily basis. And this can include, depending on where you're coming from, it could include your ancestors who have passed, your angels and spirit guides, people in your family that you feel are close to you, even though they passed years ago. So we do have those spiritual and etheric beings that help us along the way. So metaphysics is a study of that, and it's very broad. It also includes the paranormal and telecommunications and such. So I started studying that about 12 years ago before I formally retired from science, and have along the way picked up some certifications to allow me to move into energy healing. So I'm certified as a life coach. I'm certified in EFT, which is emotional freedom technique that helps release emotions that are trapped in your body, especially in the limbic brain, which is where emotions go following traumatic events. And sometimes it's very hard to release them. But if
What's the limbic brain, just so we know a little bit more about that?
Okay. Okay, the limbic brain is the primal brain. It's at the base of the brain in the back of the at the back of the neck. It's often called the reptilian brain. So it's the most primitive part of our brain that has developed over time. And as animals, we have used that brain to survive. And that's why the fight or flight mechanism is so triggered during traumatic events, because as animals, we needed it to survive, to live. And as humans, we have inherited it, but it is for our protection. Only especially in sexual assault, it gets overactivated and dysregulated. So we often go into fight or flight. We're often triggered and we go into fight or flight. So,
Sheila, before you leave that thought, I have a question.
okay.
I never thought about this until you just said that. With you said overstimulated through sexual assault. Is sexual assault unique in any way, or would it be, if someone jumped out and had a knife, if someone, physically punched me in the face, would my limbic brain react the same, or is there something unique about sexual violence?
There are unique parts of sexual assault, and I've studied this and realized that yes, we can be assaulted physically, but sexual assault is a bit different. It has different effects on the brain. And one of them is that, the whenever we get triggered, our prefrontal cortex is not really working that well. And that's the part of the brain, the thinking part of the brain, or the rational part of the brain. We lose that ability, and then emotions get triggered, and we feel the same feelings we felt during a traumatic event. Also, there's a part of the brain that gets dysregulated after an episode of sexual assault, and that is called the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And it causes hormone dysregulation.
Oh.
So there are some very specific things that happen after sexual assault that would not necessarily happen after just a regular assault. And that's why I think it's important to be able to explain those things to people, because I think knowledge is power. When they know that their body, has been dysregulated, they may think twice about not going to see their physician. They may go, oh, well, I do need to see my physician because my hormones are out of balance. So there are differences. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And then I was, in thinking about the hormone aspect of it, I think about, sexual assault is, related to hormones more closely than a punch in the nose, right? So
Exactly.
perhaps it has more to do with that specific part of our body that is more stimulated or affected by hormones.
Exactly. Exactly. And a lot of people that I've worked with in my business, they didn't realize that there was a biological cause for the things they were experiencing, like depression and anxiety and panic. And they were thinking, oh, I should be able to handle this. This is something that, I should be able to get over, and just let me work on it. But it is biologically based. And a lot of people don't realize that. So, the blaming yourself doesn't go anywhere because
Right.
your biology has changed.
That's so interesting.
Mhm.
Can I ask you, before we start into talking about all the other healing modalities that you've studied, what part of science were you steeped in before you made this, I won't say a turn or around the corner, but what,
Yeah.
were you a biologist? Were you a chemist?
I was a microbiologist, and
Mhm.
I studied clinical pathology, which is the overall science of knowing bodily mechanisms and
Mhm.
knowing how to diagnose them. So there's a lot of laboratory work, but I also did independent research for several years and really got interested in microbiology. So the background that I have in being able to read scientific articles and sort of tease out what is important and whether or not it's pertinent to a person comes in handy. It's
I
not
bet.
necessarily that I'm steeped in psychotherapy or psychology. I do have a lot of healing training and do have the knowledge, the scientific knowledge. So that's what I depend on when I am working with someone and they have chronic pain, chronic low back pain, and we start investigating their emotions and where they might be embedded in the body and their chakra systems, and we start clearing. And guess what? The pain goes away. It's not necessarily located in an area that has been directly physically attacked.
Well, let's talk about what chakra clearing is.
Okay.
How does one do that?
Energetically, we have different energetic systems in our body, beginning with the root chakra, which is our sexual organs, our motivation, the reason we get up every day, and what keeps us moving forward. So the root chakra is red. It's about motivation primarily, and then it bumps up against our sacral chakra, which is our creativity. So in sexual assault, what I see happening in a lot of people is that those two chakras especially get fractured or disjointed. And what it represents is just the energy in that region of the body. It's just a symbolism of the energy that's affected. So, one important thing to do is to try to bring that energy back in its original position, which is linear all the way up the body. They're all lined up. There's 7 of them. They're lined up and they come up the body. But to try to get it back in position and spinning in the clockwise direction and the right color, and to try to prepare that energy to be stable. What happens is there's a lot of instability in those two chakras, the root chakra and the sacrum. So those are the two that I primarily work with, but it's important to get them flowing in the right direction and get the energy flowing. It's because that's where the energy flow starts. When those two systems get shut down, we don't have a clear energy flow throughout our body. And that could contribute a lot to the depression that goes on.
Wow, that's so interesting. And so exactly what are you doing when you to help stabilize those chakras? Is it
Um,
hands-on healing? Is it
no, I can work remotely. There have been years when we, as energy healers, felt like we had to be in someone's physical presence, and people were. I mean, it used to be a requirement. And then there was a time when the healers used magnets to move the energy. Now it seems we don't need that. We can work remotely, and
interesting?
a lot of it is because um, there are a lot of etheric and spiritual gifts that are coming very rapidly to the healers in our civilization at this time. So it's evolution. It's pretty much healing evolution that is allowing us to work remotely and to work more and more effectively all the time.
Wow. And how many treatments or sessions would it take? And what does it, the experience look like? Since I'm certain most of our listeners are now extremely curious.
Yeah.
Can you take us through what that might look like? You know,
Um,
they're on a Zoom like we are kind of, or so what do
yeah,
you do? We close our eyes? Do we
yeah,
not?
you don't have to do anything.
Oh
What
my
I do
goodness.
when I'm in session with someone, I do some checks before we go deeper, but I always check their chakral energies to see if they are in alignment. So it's root, sacrum, solar plexus, heart, throat, um, third eye, which is intuitive, and crown chakra, just to see if they're in alignment. And I can see that as a medium. I can assess it. And if something is out of
You
alignment,
can see it by just looking at a person, or you can sense it.
I sense it.
Oh, okay.
I sense it. So it's sensory with me, and in the process of healing, I feel like chakral alignment is the first thing a healer should do because
Mm,
that's going to sometimes be the contributing factor to whether the other healing modalities work. So that's an important first step when I start working with someone is to get
mm.
those chakras in alignment.
Wow.
And I also ask if there's pain anywhere in the body, and I ask what the first memory was, and there are maybe 3 or 4 questions I ask just initially to understand where a person is before we start going deeper. So
Wow.
that's just it's part of a I don't know if other I think a lot of other healers do it routinely as well before they start a treatment or a
And you
session.
don't need to know anything about the person to do the alignment? Do you need to ask them what they've been through, or
Only if something appears to me to be disjointed, to be misshapen. I'll see if I can think of an example.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, if I'm aligning someone and their throat chakra looks like it's uh, in the shape of a rectangle, and there's a
Oh.
door there that I can see, and I go, what's been happening with your speech? Are you having trouble speaking out, or is there something coming up you're nervous about, or what's going on with your ability to express yourself? And generally, something will come out that involves either suppression or involves nervousness as far as speaking or involves a miscommunication. Something will come out that relates to speaking if
Mm.
I'm drawn to the throat chakra. So at that point, we start talking about what can we do, and I'll start, you know, sort of releasing energy that needs to be released and also reestablishing the energy in the throat chakra.
Amazing. And I can't believe you, so it's just one session where you can work on all these things?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
people usually come back and see you again and get realigned and more unblocked?
Um, they can if they're having, but usually it's just a preliminary. Then we go into the deeper stuff and sort of um, look at the origins of the issue that they're having.
Does it matter if it happened just one time, or if it happened when they were a child? Like, do you see differences in the alignment or misalignment based on what they went through and when, or how
Mm,
often?
no, and actually, the alignment could or could not be related to sexual assault. It might be
Oh,
related to something else. It's
mm,
just sort of a checkup on their energy and a realization that, hey, I need to do this first and
mhm,
then move into the sexual assault. But I'm glad you asked that question
mhm. Wow.
because
Go ahead.
one of the reasons I became so interested in this subject, the sexual assault, was because I had a couple of clients who had been sexually abused as a child and during the teenage years as well. And I found that when I released energy or tried to release energy, that it wasn't that it was that difficult. It just took a long time. It just took a very long time, and it was different from any of the other people that I had worked with. And I thought, this is interesting. So we went to the Akashic Records, and I'll go into what that is, but we went deeper into this person's energy, and I began releasing energy that had been transferred or existed on their ancestral DNA memory, which we actually inherit.
Wow.
So, and I started releasing that in layers as it started coming off, and then we came back to our consciousness, and I released again, and it came off much easier. So I can't prove this, but this is what I think. We all know how difficult it is for people to say, I have been sexually abused, and people will go years and years and years without talking about it. If you think about our ancestry and the people that came before, our great grandmothers, our grandmothers, our mothers, and beyond, if they were sexually assaulted, do you think they'd talk about it?
Mm-mm.
No.
Right.
And this is what you've done so brilliantly. You've brought this to the forefront. We need to talk about it, and that's really important to healing. So, if you think about generations back, way back, you can think about the sexual abuse that probably did happen, and the times that nobody opened up about it and nobody reconciled those feelings. They're buried so deep sometimes that that's why it's hard to get them to raise.
That's interesting.
So if you go there and you work on past ancestral DNA memory first, and then you come and work on this incarnation, people lighten up. I mean, they really feel it coming off. So the weight that we're carrying is not only ours, it's inherited on our DNA memory. So what I think happens is that when there's a sexual assault in this incarnation, it lands with that energy. So it's just cumulative, and it just keeps building. And that's why it takes a while to get rid of it, let it lift. So I think probably I should explain why I'm saying that we inherit emotions on our DNA memory. And how do I know that?
You're right. That'd be great.
I'm sure you're questioning that. There's a field of science called epigenetics, and what it studies is what is transmitted from generation to generation on our DNA. And a primary example would be, you've seen families, or I've seen families, where the grandfather's a doctor, the father's a doctor, the son's a doctor. It just runs in the family. It's like those talents and those abilities get get transferred on the DNA memory. A primary example that happened after 9/11 was a study they did on moms who were pregnant during that time and who had witnessed 9/11. And not only did the moms have PTSD, but they transferred it on the DNA to their unborn children. And when the children were born, they had PTSD symptoms, and they also could map that genetically using the techniques that they use in epigenetics. So, strong emotions in particular are the ones that tend to show up again in next generation. They may not show up as they were whatever they were a product of, but they're there. They're strong emotions, and when you release them, it makes a big difference in this lifetime, because you're lighter. You're much lighter, and you'll be able to do more things without trepidation. Mm-hmm. So that kind of explains the part about inheriting emotions on our DNA memory. And being able to clear that is a real, it's kind of a real step forward in energy healing, because it's important to do that. Did you have any more questions about that?
No, it's fascinating, Sheila. It's like I'd never thought about it, or it's so interesting. Where my brain went was, I have twin boys.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking about, like, if they had trauma because they were shoving each other around in the womb, could one traumatize the other one? I can remember, just, out of funny, I was traveling while I was pregnant with twins up until almost the very end. And I
Mm-hmm.
carried them almost till like the last 2 days. I was massive. And they're not identical, they're fraternal. And I would do all kinds of like, I would hold my breath so I wouldn't smell any smoke when I was, walking outside where people were smoking. I would try to keep them away from any toxicity, but they couldn't be more different. And I was thinking, maybe one was mean to the other one inside, and he scarred his DNA. I don't know. Have you done any research on that too?
I haven't done research in that area, but I've studied it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple of people who have done generational analysis. Mark Wolin wrote the book, It Didn't Begin With You.
Mm.
And he goes back 3 generations,
Oh, wow.
does questionnaires, and then backs it up by science from his laboratory. But, my thinking was going back 3 generations is fine, but there's so much energy beyond that that needs to be released.
Yeah, hundreds
And
of years.
and scientists, I guess, have a hard time including anything woo woo in their research. They have to be very practical and very dogmatic
Mm-hmm.
and test blood from 3 generations back, but they don't really go into the ethereal part of it. And he does really good research, and it's a very interesting book, but he only goes 3 generations back. And there may be a lot of other stuff there that needs to be looked at. Also, another person who has done research on trauma, Gabor Mate, some of you may know him. He's a psycho analyst, and he's done work with addicts and people who have chronic depression, and has gone back to trauma in childhood and sort of connected the dots with a lot of different people. He's done a lot of good research, but can trace back the trauma to childhood and the fact that these children, and this is often the case, children don't have anybody to go to tell what's happening to them. They just don't.
Mm-hmm. Right. And certainly most don't.
And the fact that he interviewed these people and spent time with them and went out on the streets and talked to them regularly, till he got to the bottom of what their need was. Usually, and if someone's addicted, they have a need and they're fulfilling that need. So he got to the bottom of that, so to speak. And I fully am aware that how trapped a child must feel when they're being abused. And even if they tell the other parent, it might be ignored. And
Mhm.
oftentimes they just have nowhere to go. With
Right.
you've had, you know, you've had more experience talking to people about that, but it occurred to me that a lot of the maladies, a lot of the addictions may come from just not being able to talk about it and not having anybody to tell.
Yeah. No validation, no resources.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
that's where you have just made such great strides coming out. At 18, you told the world, not just one person, but the entire world. And I think
I
that's,
did. I pretty much demanded as much, not out of ego, but just this problem had never been talked about on a public stage.
Right.
And it felt to me as though, why are we putting this in a closet and trying to pretend it doesn't exist and putting all the shame and blame on the victim? So that was definitely my main goal, and still is.
Yeah.
But I think also in reading more about your work, Sheila, the program, the 10-week program, let's talk about what that looks like. Are you doing groups, or is it one-to-one? What does that look like?
I may branch out into groups later, but right now I'm doing one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And it has 10 modules. And we start with the program on the day that our first session starts, and we move forward. We're not looking
Okay.
back. We're not looking back. The reason is the previous dynamic has happened, and we want to create a new dynamic moving forward. So I'll start with a person and understand what they're feeling at that moment and what has been their primary thought pattern for the past week or a couple of weeks. What is bothering them at that moment? And when you're an energy healer, if you release energy that is what we call coming up, it will come up to be released if it's not needed and if it's bothering you. So that's where I will start. And then we start by trying to understand through journaling and through being aware of how feelings pan out on a daily basis. We'll see what we need to do in the next session as that week moves forward. So I have them sort of in my mind scheduled once a week for 10 weeks. That can be flexible depending on what the person is going through and depending on what they're working on at that particular time with themselves. So the first session, of course, is getting to know what's happening in that person's life and how they want to take it forward with a vision of where they want to be, how they want to feel, what they want to release, the picture of what would it look like, perfect day, happy, without anxiety, depression, how, and then as the modules develop, I'm providing resources and giving tools to them to use on a daily basis to release some of that energy themselves and to look at themselves to see what's happening.
Can you
So,
give an example of some of that?
yeah,
What's an
certainly. In my work prior to this, I developed a module around self esteem, which is part of this 10-week program. And 4 of those weeks, we will be doing that module on restoring self esteem, because that seems to take a hit with sexual assault. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but we have that module, and also emotional freedom technique, which is a good way to release energy around depression and anxiety. And what I love about EFT is that it's portable and you can do it yourself. And you're tapping on acupuncture points or acupressure points that have already been established, and it's known that these points do release energy. So there's a statement that you say, and there are a number of points that you tap on. You can take this anywhere, and you can do it at any time. If you're at work and you're angry and you need to come down a little bit, you can go to the bathroom and tap it out and come back with a level head. It also helps when you get triggered. It also helps when you are in an emotional state where you're in tears, and you can't be in tears. So it's a very good tool. And the other things that we'll concentrate on are things that reconnect mind, body, and spirit, or mind, body, and soul, because that goes a long way in my mind toward reestablishing balance in your HPA axis, in your hormone imbalance. Because when your mind is communicating with your body, is communicating with your spirit, you are involved in restoring yourself. You're restoring your core, you're restoring your biology, you're restoring how you feel about yourself. So some of those arts include yoga, Kundalini yoga, and Tai Chi and Qigong, which are movements. It's just thought processes and movements, and it sort of clears away any muddled feelings or thoughts you may be having about yourself. So it's clarity. It brings clarity. I also teach meditation, and I also teach mindfulness. And then we go a little bit deeper. There's a session near the end where we'll go a little bit deeper and pull out anything that has come to the surface again to be released. And what I think is very, very important in this whole process, and try to instill this importance, is at the very beginning, I think someone benefits from doing something to help someone else. And there's something psychological about that, which fits into the psychosocial part of healing. When you feel like you are needed, when you feel like you're important, when you feel like other people need you, it doesn't have to be anything that has to do with sexual assault. It could be anything. It could be, food court. It could be, help sitting with an elderly person and reading. It could be anything. But I really think it's important to take that step. It can be a baby step. It doesn't have to be anything huge. And get yourself to a point where you feel like your importance is seen and appreciated.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, especially on that point. I think our listeners probably know that it might seem like all I do is work around this issue all the time, but on my daily life, I do exactly that. And it's always, you can just say, I like your dress, or you can just give someone a compliment, or just pick something up when someone's dropping it whole. You just do the smallest little thing and someone smiles at you, and then you're like, today was a good day.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes forget how those little micro moments are really part of, the whole happiness quotient in
Yeah.
our everyday life. So I really like that idea, and incorporating that into your 10-week program is probably incredibly valuable for your participants.
Yeah. And then the last session, we look forward and we want to instill practices that will be sustaining over time.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go back and assess and reassess what we've done in those 10 weeks and pull out the most important parts for that person and have them sort of establish a schedule, a timeline going forward for, the goals shouldn't stop. You can have goals all your life, and personal goals as far as personal development shouldn't stop. And so going forward, we'll reinforce what we talked about and sort of develop a schedule around it. And I will do a follow up each month after that for 6 months for free to see,
Nice.
to see how they're doing and if there's anything that I can do to help. So it's about the 10th is about looking back, reinforcing what we've done, developing protocol going forward, and also understanding that this is it's not over. Healing goes on for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a process, and it's maintenance. It's just basic maintenance that has to be done.
Absolutely. I guess go ahead. What were you going to say?
Um, there's one thing I think that it's important to just share with you guys. And it was the second reason that I wanted to be involved in helping sexual assault people. And I'll make it short, but it's about my relationship with my mom. and how for years I tried to be seen and I tried to be loved and I tried to reach out and have an emotional connection with my mom. And for some reason, I just couldn't. It just didn't happen. She was not receptive to me in the loving way. So I finally stopped trying. And then, even in my old age, I was still wondering, and I was having sessions with other mediums about mom issues. And one day, one of my medium friends was reading me, and she said to me, Sheila, did you know your mom was sexually assaulted when she was a child?
Oh.
And I went, oh, that's why there was no connection to me. She harbored those feelings, and we went back and looked from age 8 to age 16. She was sexually assaulted by her father. And I had suspected this, but I really didn't know because she never talked about it. She harbored those emotions around that her entire life and took them to her grave.
Wow. That's
But I felt it. I
mm,
felt it my whole life. And I felt that still there are times people are around me and they say they love me and they're sharing, and I go, but I feel so alone. I have always felt alone, no matter what my situation is. So that what that does is tell me, yes, it affects the survivor. It also affects family, and it also affects children who are in the shadow of those emotions that never get released and never get reconciled because people just won't talk about it. Now, when my mom was alive, there's a huge stigma around talking about something like that. There was a huge stigma around going to see a psychologist. The town I was raised in was very small, population 3,000. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody's business. She was depressed. She emotionally was all over the place all the time. And she just didn't know how to handle it, but she would not say a word about it.
mm,
She just would not talk about it. And
wow.
nobody knew. The children, me and my brother, we never knew. We always thought it was our fault that when she was crying or, having an episode or whatever, we didn't know. And now when I look back, it's not so much that I hurt over it as that I understand it. I
Mm-hmm.
really get it now. I know what she was going through in those episodes, and I know why she was emotionally all over the place all the time. It's because it just wanted to come out and she never let it out.
Well, I think that must have somehow deep down, when I asked you at the start of our conversation, where did you go from scientist to this healing? It must have been pulling you that way all along, Sheila.
I
There was a
think
bigger force that was probably written into your DNA, right?
I think so, Katie. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I would, as a young person, have been effective at what I'm doing now. But since I've had a lot of experiences and some training, and I can look back and I can be intuitive and see into people um, as to what they might need, I think now's the time for me to be doing this.
I totally agree. I think it's delightful to have you on the show. Before we start wrapping up, remember we were going to define what Akashic
Yes, yes.
records are. So let's just tell our listeners more about that.
The Akashic Records, I'm going to read this because it's from Edgar Casey. He actually wrote it. And he was the person in the 20th century who did the most with the records as far as healing both physical ailments and also emotional and psychological problems. Um, the records were not available to us until the beginning of the 20th century. So around 1900, they were opened up so that the theosophist or the theology and philosophers could access them or to have information come from them. Before that, they were not accessible. So Edgar Casey did a lot of work with them. I'm going to read what he writes about the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records, or the Book of Life, can be equated to the universe's supercomputer system. It is this system that acts as the control or the central storehouse of all information for every individual who has ever lived upon the earth. More than just a reservoir of events, the Akashic Records contain every deed, word, feeling, thought, and intent that has ever occurred at any time in the history of the world. Much more than simply a memory storehouse, however, these Akashic Records are interactive in that they have a tremendous influence upon our everyday lives, our relationships, our feelings, and our belief systems, and the potential realities we draw toward us. The Akashic Records contain the entire history of every soul since the dawn of creation. These records connect each one of us to one another.
Wow.
So I think he explains it a lot better than I could. But,
Yeah, that was perfect.
but what is so valuable is that, we can go back, assess, release emotion. We will never be able to change events that happen. They're all written, but we can rearrange energy around them so that the trauma doesn't stay with us generation to generation.
Makes sense. Wow. This has been so interesting, Sheila. You've taught me so much, and I'm sure our listeners have just, learned another set of options. And the 10-week program just, I'm sure you're very proud of the work you did to create it. And how many people have experienced it so far?
Um, what I've done is I've done trial sessions with friends to see how I want it to pan out. So I did that first, and then I've had about 5 people complete it. So we're doing follow-ups right now. So it's interesting that to see how they're. It seems like their outlook changes. They look at themselves differently first, and that's
Mm-hmm.
important. And then they look at the world differently, which is very exciting. And they find a purpose, which they understand that yes, this happened to me, but now I have a broader purpose. So it's great. And I wanted to let everybody know that I am offering single modules if someone's interested at a very reduced price.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful.
and I need to give, I guess, contact information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we
My
can put it in the notes for the show, Sheila.
okay, good.
Yeah, just send that as an email. And for our listeners who want to learn more about Sheila's program, just check our show notes and we will have more information there so you can explore this process with Sheila. Does that sound okay with you?
That sounds wonderful. That sounds great.
Great. Anything else you want to share? I mean, it sounds like a whole new world ahead. So, anything else to tell our listeners before they log off?
No, just I appreciate your time, and I really am passionate about this project. So, I believe that every soul is precious, and the quality of life is precious, and any improvements that we can make while we're here are important. So
Absolutely.
I'm willing to help if I can.
Well, we are so grateful, Sheila. I think the fabulous thing about the podcast to me, since I get to meet everyone and our listeners get to hear everyone, is that there's so many different options out there. And I think some of the themes, no matter what, are, just find small ways. I always say, find some small way to be happy every day. Good self care, and find some way to do something nice for somebody else or for the planet every day. And you can keep going that way. It might be small steps, but I think they're always in a positive direction. And I can just feel your warmth and your care, and it's so heartening.
Good.
So thank you for sharing your vision and your own mission. And I love your journey that, you were born, you had this childhood, and then you went off into science, and then you kind of looped back and use it for so many other purposes. So I love it. Thank you for that part of your life journey with us.
No, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed sharing with you. And, I always like to
Yeah.
talk about myself. It's great.
Well, it's not just about you. It's also your journey and your openness and willingness to tell us how you got different places and how you think about things. I find it fascinating. So
Okay.
I hope our listeners will look up in the show notes, and those who kind of click with what you heard today. For our listeners, please continue to reach out. The podcast purpose is to give you so many ideas and so many stories and narratives, and just take them all in and pick which ones. It's like a big apple tree. Whichever apple looks delicious to you,
Exactly.
you pick that one off the tree and take a bite and see how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so lovely, Sheila. Well, I can't wait to hear. Maybe some of our listeners will come find you and then they'll write back to us. And maybe we could do a show when they've gone through your program and then we can talk about how it worked. That would be really interesting.
I would love that. I would love that.
Yeah, well, we will absolutely put it out there. So thank you so much, Dr. Woods, Sheila, for spending some time with us and our listeners. For all of our listeners, remember this is a long journey together. We are stronger, we thrive, we survive. And remember, on the podcast, we just opened our store, and check out any of the books that are listed. They're usually ones that we've mentioned in the podcast, and we're making cool shirts with episode titles out of them. So, you can wear your healing every day if you'd like. But together, we definitely are stronger than when we're alone. So thank you, and tune in to another episode of Dear Katie. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. I hope very much you found today's episode helpful, empowering, and a way to take another step in that long journey toward healing and supporting those we care about, learning about sexual violence prevention, and also survivor support. For those of you who don't know, again, the Take Back the Night website has tons of great resources, books, self-care options, cool merch. If you're feeling like you need a wearable, we have great t-shirts. Of course, we would love it if you follow along on our free newsletter with news and events going on around the country and even around the globe. And finally, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find our entire community popping up here and there, and recaps of our podcast episodes as well. So together we shatter the silence, and together we end the violence. Take care.